Hello, I'm Joe, I'm here at Riverside, and today we're making chili con carne. Now, you might think with a dish whose name translates as chili with meat, you have quite a lot of freedom with such broad terms, but actually there are people who are very passionate about the ingredients and techniques used to make chili con carne. What we're doing today I wouldn't describe as an authentic recipe. We are using beans, and some people feel very passionately about not using beans. There will be some tomato puree in there. Some people equally feel passionate about not using any tomato. But the fundamentals of the recipe remain the same. It's some beef, slow cooked, with some chili in a lovely kind of soupy, spicy sauce. So let's get cooking. As I say, this is not necessarily the most authentic chili con carne as they would have it in Texas and North Mexico. I've got some lovely beef shin here. This is already boned out. What we're going to do is cube this up into pretty big chunks, give that a smoke by itself with some lovely rubs, and then cut it into smaller cubes still and braise it in our chili sauce. So I'm just going to start taking this apart. Now we're rubbing this today with some beautiful rubs. We've got a chipotle one and an ancho one from the Smoky Carter, and these rubs are produced in the UK, obviously available in the Riverside shop and website, and those guys make some really lovely rubs, so well worth checking out. So I'm just putting these into, you know, roughly 2-inch square chunks, and then we'll get them in the bowl, get a bit of rapeseed oil on them and rub them up. Right, our shin is all cubed up. I've already prepped these so that my dirty hand, I don't have to use that to take lids off anything. Just got some rapeseed oil here. Just going to use this as a little binder. And you know, if you've got a tray or a board or whatever, then you can lay these out in a single layer and rapeseed oil them and then rub them up. So I'm going to go with the coarser of the two rubs first. I'm going to be fairly liberal with this. All of the flavours here will get slightly softened by being put into the sauce, so we can afford to go fairly heavy. Obviously being mindful that in cubing the beef up, you've increased the surface area, so you will naturally get more of the flavour anyway of the rub. So maybe a little bit more of that. And you also want to bear in mind that there is salt in these rubs, and it's not just like using herbs and spices. You have to be mindful of the salt content when you're doing anything like this. So you can see the rapeseed oil has enabled the rub to stick. There's a lovely smell coming off it even before any heat gets to it. Just going to go a little bit more with both of these. And the reason for cubing up is you get a quicker cook for a start than you would on a big joint, but also, as I say, the increased surface area means you get more Maillard reaction on the outside, which is the caramelization of proteins. And so that lovely bark you get, the crust on a steak, that's what that is. And of course, that means you get better depth of flavour when all of this ends up in the stew. So let's get this onto smoke. So we're using a Weber 57 kettle today. This one happens to be a Master Touch, but of course any 57 kettle will do. Any gas barbecue, any barbecue you've got, really, as long as there's enough space. We're using the snake method. First of all, we'll change the setup later when we come to cook the sauce, but just to get some smoke and some colour on the beef, first of all, we do have a video on how to set up the snake method on our channel, so either click the link in the description down below or search snake method on our YouTube channel and you'll be able to find out how to do it yourself at home. Well, the shin's been in for about 2.5 hours. The kettle's been sat between 130 and 150 degrees Celsius. It fluctuates in temperature a little bit. We've got everything prepped to make the chili sauce, so I'm going to get the beef off, cube it up into smaller bits, put it to one side, and then we can concentrate on making the sauce. So our beef's all cubed up in sort of maybe 1/2 inch cubes. We've got all of our other ingredients chopped up and ready to go. We're going to be cooking everything in the Weber Dutch oven. The particular thing to note is this paste here, which I've made using ancho, chipotle powders. I actually had some flakes that I put through a pestle and mortar, some cayenne powder, some cocoa powder, some cumin and some ground coriander. You mix that with about 200 ml of strong coffee, and already that smells beautiful. It actually just smells like chili con carne. So once we get that in there, you can imagine the aromas that it's going to bring. So let's get cooking. Right, we've got our Weber Dutch oven in here. We've got the charcoal basket set up somewhere between direct and indirect. So there's a channel in the middle where there's no direct heat. And then they're probably about 6 inches away from each other like that. And so what we'll get is some heat either side and then a little bit cooler in the middle, but obviously because it's cast iron it will absorb so much heat and hold it. So it will take a while to come up to temp. I've got some duck fat here that I'm just going to get in there. 3 spoonfuls should do it. Doesn't want to come off. And we'll just leave that to come up to temperature along with the pan and the barbecue. So everything's up to a nice high temperature now. I've got some smoked streaky bacon here. All of that in there. Get that moving around. The idea with this, don't necessarily need to colour it too much, but this as a first layer of flavour is always absolutely delicious. If you've got any leftover smoked pork belly that you've cooked the day before or a little while before, then you can absolutely cube that up and put that in here. One of the really nice things about chili con carne, if you're into smoking anyway, is it's such a good use of leftovers. And I would say it's probably the best thing for a novice smoker to have in their arsenal, because if you cook something and it ends up being a bit dry, cube it up, stick it in a chili, no one will ever be any the wiser. It'll be one of the best chilies you've ever had, I'm sure. So we're just going to let this cook down a bit. Leave it alone a little while. And you can see it's getting some colour on it, which is what we want. And usually you might use a slotted spoon to take this bacon out, just leave the fat in there and before adding it back in later. But on this occasion I think I'm just going to let everything roll together. So that bacon is now lovely and golden brown. It's still got a bit of crisping up to do, but don't forget it will carry on cooking when we add everything else. So I'm going to go in with our onions. Stir those around, let them cook down for a couple of minutes. And once the onions have had a chance to just start softening, sweetening and going a bit translucent, we're going to go in with 6 cloves of garlic. If you don't like garlic as much as I do, then feel free to use less. I happen to love the stuff. Every last morsel. And then stir that in. And at the same time, I'm going in with 2 sliced Romano peppers. You might see these in the supermarket as sweet pointed peppers. Just give them a stir. Now I've left the peppers quite big. I like the contrast in texture, but also it gives a nice visual difference to be able to see kind of big slices of pepper. I don't know, to me I just think it adds a little something to the dish, as well as the textural contrast, as I say. So just keep it moving, wait for everything to start breaking down. At this point you want to be very careful, there's no liquid in there and the garlic could burn pretty easily, particularly if you're running at a high heat. So all we're doing at this stage is just trying to cook off the rawness of these ingredients before we go in with the next layer. Okay, the next thing I'm going in with is about 1.5 tablespoons, maybe 2 tablespoons of tomato puree. And then we're going to add our lovely spice paste. Try and get all of that in there. Again, you need to work quite quickly because all the while you're doing this, there's potential for the other ingredients to be burning on the bottom. Try to get back to it quite quickly. And literally as soon as that spice mix hits the heat, it just releases all of those aromas. It smells so beautiful. So you give that a good mix. Again, cook out the rawness of those, particularly with the tomato puree. You just want to give it a little bit of a blast with the heat. And then very quickly, in with our beef. Keep it moving, and now you want to try and get the beef and the other ingredients coated in the spice mix. Now if you feel when you make the paste according to the recipe that the flavours aren't punchy enough, you can always add more of the dry ingredients further on down the line. I really think this is one of those dishes that use the recipe as a guideline, taste it constantly as you go, and tailor it to your own tastes. Myself, I like it quite spicy, but I'm making this as a base, not too spicy, because I don't want the guys in the shop to have their heads blown off. So you can see that's all covered nicely in that spice paste. You can hear it sizzling. So what I'm going to do now, I've got 2 bottles of American Pale Ale, in with both. Now these are often £4 for £6 in the supermarket, so I always think it's best to get something that you're happy drinking. And we can drink the other 2 when we serve, or while you're cooking. Work that round, and the idea is you want to cook off any sort of alcohol flavours and just get left with a nice richness of the beer. Guinness actually works very well in this context as well, because obviously that's a dark, deep flavour. So we're just going to leave that, let the beer cook down a bit. So you can see, even after just a few minutes, that beer's kind of gone. Considering we put, what, 660ml in there, it's not much liquid at all. So we're going to add some lovely beef stock. I would urge you, if you can, try to get fresh stock rather than using a cube. And as well as that, I'm going to go in with some chicken stock, same quantity. And then, as with everything, just work all of the ingredients in. Now obviously the liquid's going in cold, so every time it just takes a little bit of heat out and needs heating up, which is nice. And then this will offend traditionalists, but I'm going in with a whole can of pinto beans. And I know it's not truly authentic, but I do think that the beans add something, and for me it's evocative of the chilies that I had as a child. We'll be serving this later on a jacket potato, which I hope will remind everybody of bonfire nights as children. And then finally, another layer of chili flavour, just 1 whole fresh red chilli, 1 whole fresh green chilli, and I've chopped the green chilli finely but kept the red chilli in slices, similar to what we did with the pointed pepper. Again, just for a bit of textural contrast, visual contrast. And at that point, it really is as simple as leaving it all to come together for a while. I would keep an eye on it. Obviously you've got direct heat on both sides. You'll need to keep it moving so that you don't get burns there and burns there underneath. But just stir it once every, 10 minutes or so. What I'm going to do, the lid's off the Dutch oven at the moment. I'm going to let that come up to a nice simmer, and then I'll put the lid on and just let it all get to know each other, as I say. Well, it's been several hours that the sauce has been cooking down. I finished it off with just a handful of finely chopped coriander and the juice of 2 limes, just stirred that through, and also a bit of salt. Obviously, as I said earlier on, the rubs have got salt in them, and so you want to be careful about adding too much salt, but I tasted it, for my taste at least, I thought it needed a little bit more salt. So, I've baked some potatoes. For garnish, we've got some fresh chilies sliced, some pickled jalapenos sliced, some white onion and chopped coriander, some sour cream, some vintage cheddar, and some wedges of lime. Got a bit more salt here because when I have my bit, I'd just like a little bit more over the top. So, I am going to take one of these jacket potatoes, cut a cross in the top, get it into our bowl and give it a squidge, and then get some butter in there. Love butter. Urge you to use it as often as possible. If you wanted to be a bit French about making your chili con carne, you could stir about 50-60 grams of unsalted butter through at the end just to give it some richness. I haven't done that, but do feel free. So that will be very hot. We will move this to one side. Look how lovely and steamy this is. And that beef has just broken down so nicely. So, take our bowl over and load our potato with as much chilli as you fancy. Bit more for me, I reckon. And then put it down here. So first things first, I want to get the cheese on there. Obviously that coming into contact with the chilli means it's going to melt down nicely. Now you may sense a theme emerging. I like quite a lot of everything. Part of the reason I look the way I do. So, good bit of cheese on there. And then I'm going to go for some of our sour cream. Now this will end up pretty fully loaded, which, as I say, is just how I like it. Some of that onion and coriander. I think I'm going to have to make peace with the fact that the surface will end up a bit mucky. Get some of our, forget the tweezers, get some of our pickled jalapenos on here. Get some of our fresh chilies on top. A wedge of lime. And I'll just finish it with a little bit of salt over the top. And for this time of year, you cannot argue with a bowl like that. So I'm going to give this a try. I've got myself a nice cold beer out. As I said earlier on, make sure you buy enough beer for you to drink while you're cooking and while you're eating. So I'll get this lime squeezed over the top and then out of the way. I think I'll pick this up. Don't fancy trying to eat it from a distance. Get a bit of potato in there. Nice bit of chilli. Make sure you get a bit of everything, all of the garnish as well. Be very hot. It's just the perfect thing for this kind of weather. It actually looks pretty sunny here, but it is cold, I assure you. And it's just layer after layer of flavour. All of that work you did with the paste, with the meat getting smoked, and then all of the garnishes, it's just so lovely. You've got the spice in the sauce itself, offset by the sour cream on top, but then more fresh spice with the pickled and fresh chilies on top. Really, just a lovely dish. So I'll write the recipe up for this and put it in a blog post, the link for which will be in the description down below. We'd love to see if you have a go at making this. So do take photos, tag us in everything, give us a like, give us a subscribe, like us over on Instagram, Facebook, and I hope to see you again very soon. Cheers.